So why did my husband leave me? I kind of told you the story before about our situation, um, being shocked that I was a person that their husband left them. It was shocking. It was upsetting, all those things. But as with most things in life, when something like that happens, you go through the range of emotions. You're angry, you're devastated, you're emotional, you're crying, you blame someone else, you blame the other person. When all those things finally kind of settle, hopefully you are able to take a look in the mirror, take a hard look at yourself, and decide what really happened and be honest about that. So months later, this was not an easy process. I want to, make that clear. Months later, once I wasn't crying as much and I was moving on through some of the stages of the grief, which is what it was, right? When you lose a long-term marriage, your best friend, who you thought was the love of your life, all those things. Eventually, I did turn to self-reflection. And what I determined was my husband left because he didn't like the person I was anymore. He didn't like the person that the events in our life shaped me into being. We had a disabled child. We both came from very toxic families. And not to blame our families, because I do think they did the best they could. But we learned some very toxic traits. We didn't learn how to communicate. We didn't learn how to do, we didn't have the highly effective traits and characteristics that highly successful people have, right? So, and then we were stuck in survival mode because we had 2 children, one that was severely disabled. We were very poor in the beginning of our marriage, really struggling to level up. And so we had, it was hard. Our life was hard. And especially having a disabled child that required 24/7 care. Basically, he could not be alive without one of us keeping him alive. Feeding tube, blind, seizures, diapers, can't walk, can't talk, the whole gamut of disabilities of a disabled child. So we had a hard life. And those experiences in life shape you, good and bad. And these experiences really shaped me into an insecure, very controlling person. I tried to control everything I could because I couldn't control how my disabled son, was feeling. If he was having a very heavy day of seizures, if he was sick, if his teacher was absent and now I had to stay home with him, if his nurse was absent and now I had to stay home with him, if he was having that's a whole nother video, a whole nother series. But these events in my life shaped me into this person that my husband no longer liked. He no longer wanted to be around. And I discovered that through self-reflection because at some point I was able to be more honest with myself. And I truthfully told myself, this man loved you. This is a good man. He was a good husband, a good father, a good provider. I don't think the man ever yelled at me, raised his voice at me. I feel like he contributed a lot. Friends and families don't necessarily agree with me always about that. I don't have any complaints whatsoever about how he was as a husband, provider, man, father, lover, friend, all those things. I know this man loved me, but yet he didn't like me anymore. This is a person I truly trusted, and yet he doesn't like me anymore. So I had to really look at myself, and what I figured out was I didn't like who I became either. I didn't like a lot of things about myself either. And so I decided to rebuild myself from the ground up. I analyzed every part of myself, what I liked, who I was, what my character was all about, how I responded in different situations. how I interacted with people, how I communicated. Of course, I did all this self-help blogs, books, podcasts, blah, 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 blah. But self-reflection was a major piece of that, and being truly honest with myself. And I realized I didn't like myself either. I didn't like a lot of things about myself. Of course, my ex-husband didn't. Who would want to live in that situation? I can't blame him for that. And so that's when the real work started. Now I love myself. I love everything about myself. And if I find out I don't like something about myself, I change it. I fix it. I can do that. I've learned how, and it's amazing. And I want to help you do that too. But that is why my husband left me. He no longer liked me. He didn't like the person I became. What I ended up resenting him for, and then having to get over that as well, is the fact that he is the one person who knew what we were going through on a day in, day out basis. He's the one person that knew I had this disabled child when I was 20. My emotional maturity and growth was stunted from that point forward. I gave everything to my children, my husband, my employer. I had nothing left for me. I didn't have a chance to grow. I didn't have a chance to become the best version of myself. There was no time built in my life for me. And that's fine. That's fine. I ended up where I am here today. But I did resent at some point my ex-husband for not giving me the grace, not for being the one person who knew what we were dealing with on a daily basis, and not giving me the grace of understanding I was doing the best I can. And I'm not saying it was good enough, but it was all that I had. And he's the one person that should have known that. So that was yet again something that I needed to overcome. And I have, and I do forgive him for that. And I do understand that at some point he had to love himself enough to say he doesn't want to live a certain way. And I appreciate and respect that about him. And I would do that for myself now as well. If I was in a relationship where I was with a person that was affecting my inner peace, I would not stay in that relationship. I would love them from afar, but I would move on and save my inner peace, because that's my most prized possession. And that's what he was doing. And I get that. At one point, he thought I was very difficult, and I was at times, 100%. But our life was just difficult. And our life shaped us into the people that we became. And we didn't know how to get out of that. And so I understand why he left. He didn't like who I was as a person. Our life shaped us in certain ways, and he didn't like who we became. He didn't like who I became. And I can't blame him for that. I can't blame him for that. And I don't. I did, but I don't. And it brought me to where I am today, where I have worked on myself, took so many hard looks in the mirror, had hard truths, had those hard conversations with myself, worked on myself, and am constantly and continuing to become the best version of myself. And there's so many lessons that come out of that I am going to share with you. But that's why my husband left. He didn't like the person that I became. And I discovered through the self-reflection of accepting and understanding that neither did I. So realizing why my husband left me was my first really big lesson on how important it is to show someone grace, and that you cannot show someone grace until you first extend it to yourself. I realized that the one person I thought should understand and give me grace and show me grace did not. Could not, because he had to put his own inner peace first, and that I get that. But I had to forgive myself and show myself grace and love myself through all of the hard truths about myself in order to now extend grace onto other people. When I accepted the fact that my husband left me because he didn't like me as a person, the one person I love more than anyone in the world next to my children, didn't like who I was. When I truly understood that and knew that he would not feel that way unless there was so much truth to it, because this is a good man I had to look at myself and own the fact that I didn't handle situations well, that I did overreact, that I was controlling, that I was insecure, all these things. And then I had to really analyze that and step back and understand why I was those ways and why I couldn't develop past those types of characteristics, those character traits. Why was I so insecure? Which is the ugliest trait a person could have, and I was so insecure. Why did I overreact? Why did I control everything? And I had to really analyze all those parts of my life, and then I had to forgive myself for being so controlling. I understand why I was so controlling. I was a 20-year-old person without any skills, tricks, tools in my tool belt. And I was thrown into, I had 2 children, one amazing, super gifted, the second severely disabled. By the age of, I wasn't even 21 yet, and I had 2 children. One that needed me for every single aspect of his life to stay alive at the age of 20. That's a lot to go through. That is a lot to expect a person to handle. And for me to be expected to handle that perfectly when I was already immature, I was a young woman who didn't know who I was, what I wanted. I was not this evolved human. I was in survival mode. I did pretty damn well. Put myself through college, started a teaching career, did very well in that, kept 2 children alive, fed my family, worked, took care of the home, all the things. One of these children literally needed me to care for him, to keep him alive. I had to help him breathe. I had to help him walk, eat, medicine, seizures, he's blind, all the things. How is a 20-year-old girl, not woman, girl, expected to handle that with grace, with experience, with knowledge, with understanding, compassion, empathy, with self-control, with reasonability? I didn't have any of that. Of course I didn't do well. How could I? I was in survival mode. I didn't know if I was coming or going, but I kept going. And so once I analyzed my life and how hard it was for me in that time period, I had to give myself grace. I cried for my 20-year-old self, my 30-year-old self. How did I do that? How? I had to give myself grace and say, you did the best you could. You did the best you could. You did everything you possibly could. Most people can't handle that. That took a lot of grit, a lot of perseverance. I had to dig deep every single day. I mean, we're talking, my child never slept through the night more than 3 hours. I had to feed him every single 3 hours through a feeding tube. Seizure medicine around the clock, 300 seizures a day, diapers, blind, wheelchair bound, picking him up when eventually, got older and was over 100 pounds, picking him up and down, up and down, up and down, the baths, the medicine, all the things. How did I handle that at the age of 20? I don't know if I could handle it now. That's not true. I would handle it because I can handle anything. But at the age of 20, I was expecting myself to do this perfectly, wonderfully. My ex-husband expected me to do this with the grace and maturity of an experienced, evolved soul that I was not. No. So when I really analyzed that, I realized I had to forgive myself, and I had to apologize to myself, and I had to give myself grace and credit for doing everything that I did. It seems impossible. I don't believe it. It seems like a different life. I do not believe that I was able to do that I kept him alive for 17 years almost, and he was my husband and I kept him alive for 17 years, and he was supposed to die. 75% of kids with his diagnosis die before age 2. And we kept him alive for almost 17 years. I did wonderfully. I should be super proud of myself. Instead, I was mad at myself for how I handled it. How else could I have handled any of that? I did not have the tools. I was not evolved. I was not aware on any level. I was an NPC going through life responding and just trying to control and respond, and responding the wrong way most of the time. But I kept my family happy and healthy and alive. I did all the things. And so once, you go through that whole evolution of your feelings and memories and processes, and you realize you did the best you could. So you give yourself grace. And when you give yourself grace, you are then able to extend that courtesy to other people, realizing that every person is doing the best they can with what they have. Every person wants to be the best version of themselves, and they're trying to do that with their intellectual ability, their emotional intelligence, all their life experiences that have shaped them to this point. They're doing the best they can. But you cannot understand, appreciate, and give them that courtesy of understanding that until you first apply it to yourself. Give yourself grace. You've been through a lot. You're doing very well. Keep going. You can do it. Don't give up on yourself. Don't be too hard on yourself. Face the hard answers. Face yourself and be honest with yourself. But then fix these issues and forgive yourself so that you can find the inner peace. You can give yourself grace. You can go through the rest of your life once you extend this grace to yourself with a happy, light-hearted inner peace.